I left work late one night and found a small piece of folded line paper tucked under my windshield wiper. I didn't think too much of it as I pulled it free and opened it. I was surprised to see a phone number scribbled on it with the name Aaron just above it and the words, "Please call me soon," underneath. I found it a little weird that someone would leave their number on my car like that. I didn't know who Aaron was, but in my line of work, I encounter a lot of people. I work the register at Walmart, so that should give you a general idea of the mail traffic flow. I crumpled the paper up and got into my car. The idea to toss it aside had crossed my mind, but I didn't want some poor guy's number to fall into just anyone's hands. I made the decision to throw it away when I got home, and that's precisely what I did when I got there. I showered, ate, and talked to my boyfriend for about an hour before my eyes got so heavy that I could barely keep them open. I was scheduled to work the next afternoon from 3 to 11, and as usual, the entire shift was long and boring, and I couldn't wait until it was over. I clocked out as soon as my shift ended and made my way to my car. After pulling my keys from my purse, I looked up at my car and immediately stopped dead in my tracks at what I saw. I was only 20 or so feet away, but I could clearly see a squarish white piece of paper tucked under my windshield wiper, just like the night before. I glanced around the parking lot but didn't see anything but cars and a handful of random people loading bags into their vehicles. With my senses on high alert, I carefully approached my car and removed the piece of paper and opened it. It looked like the same name and phone number, only this time underneath the phone number, the words read, "Still waiting for your call." I felt terrified and disgusted at the same time. I balled up the paper and tossed it on the pavement before quickly getting into my car and rushing out of the parking lot and heading straight home. I called my boyfriend along the way and told him about what happened. He joked that it was probably some old guy looking to score with someone who was barely legal. After I told him how gross that was, I told him I would call him back before I went to bed because I had just gotten home and I wanted to tell my parents about my secret stalker. Of course my mom was concerned, and my dad was so upset he vowed to stake out the parking lot with his gun so he could catch the person who was leaving these notes on my windshield and scare the hell out of him. For obvious reasons, I was relieved that I didn't have to go into work the next day. Not only would I get a much needed break from my job, but maybe a day or two of not seeing me or my car in the parking lot might be just what's needed to help my secret stalker lose my scent as well as interest in me. As I always did on my days off, I left out of the house around 10:30 in the morning and prepared to head to the gym. I opened my car door and threw my gym bag into the passenger seat before I took a seat behind the steering wheel. I cranked the engine, then engaged in a long, deep yawn as I allowed the motor to warm. Just as I was about to shift into gear, I noticed a folded, wrinkled piece of paper directly in front of me, tucked under the wiper blade. My heart started to race and my mounting fear put me on total edge. The first thing that came to mind was all those old horror movies where someone would get into their car, not knowing a killer was hiding in the back seat. I didn't bother to find out if my back seat was empty or not. I didn't even bother to cut the car off. I jumped out and ran back into the house and got my dad. With his gun in hand, he went out and checked my car. He came back inside a few minutes later and said that there was no sign that anyone other than me had been in there. He had also brought in the piece of paper that was on my windshield, and the look on his face let me know that he had already read it. He told me that maybe it was time that I called the police. He handed me the note and I read it. It looked like the same note I had tossed last night, only this time the words and numbers had been scribbled out. And on the back of the note read, "You're just like all the others. You'll die like them too, bitch." Those words were terrifying and filled me with a fear I had never known before. When we got to the police station, I was pleasantly surprised at how seriously they took my situation. Maybe 5 minutes after walking into the station and showing the first cop I came across the threatening note left on my car, I found myself meeting with a Detective Greer, who informed me that I wasn't the first to receive a threatening note from the mysterious Aaron. Apparently, this was someone who so far traveled through 4 states over the past 2 weeks, visiting Walmart stores located near the highways he was believed to travel along. He would leave innocent notes on the windshields of women who either worked for the store or were simply shopping there. Their stories mirrored mine to a T, only in their cases, no one took them seriously until it was too late. I was unaware of it up until that point, but the man the authorities dubbed as the Walmart Stalker had brutally raped and murdered 5 women, 1 from each of the first 3 states he passed through, and 2 from the most recent state he had been in. I could feel my entire body tremble with fear. I couldn't help but fearfully wonder if I was going to be victim number 6. Detective Greer must have seen the worry on my face because he made a futile attempt to ease my worry by telling me that they were going to catch this guy soon. He told me that even the FBI had joined in the hunt for him. The detective also told me that there was going to be a couple more officers patrolling our neighborhood, and he suggested that I should either take some time off from work or look into transferring to another store until they caught this guy. In the meantime, he assured me that an officer would be assigned to the parking lot of the Walmart where I worked. When me and my parents got home, I was still shaken by what the detective told me, but when a police cruiser slowly rolled down our street, I felt a minute degree of safety that I wholly welcomed. I don't know exactly how I fell asleep that night, but somehow I did. I woke up the next morning to the sound of the house phone ringing. I looked at the time on my cell phone and saw that it was a little past 10 a.m. I ignored the ringing house phone and tried to go back to sleep, thinking that one of my parents would answer it. Then I remembered that it was Monday and both of them were at work. I tiredly dragged myself out of bed and headed into my parents' room to answer the phone. I picked the cordless up off of their nightstand and answered. I instantly recognized Detective Greer's voice as he spoke my name. "Yeah, it's me," I said. "Everything okay?" In a tone that I could only describe as forced calm, he asked, "Is anyone home with you right now? Parents, siblings, anyone?" I said, "No, I'm here alone." He then said, "I'm going to tell you something, but it's imperative that you don't panic. I need you to remain absolutely calm." "What is it?" I said. Detective Greer then said, "One of your neighbors just called into 911. They reported seeing a man creeping into one of your basement windows. Someone's definitely in that house with you." I could feel the blood rush from my head. I almost felt like I was gonna faint. I didn't know what to say or do, but then I listened in to what the detective was saying. He said, "Cruisers are on the way to you now. Is there any place you can hide until they get there? A room you can lock yourself in, preferably a place farthest from the basement?" I forced myself to answer, "I'm in my parents' room on the 2nd floor. Their door doesn't have a lock though." "Okay," the detective said, "that's not a problem. Just wedge a chair underneath the doorknob or slide something heavy in front of the door. But whatever you do, don't leave that room." As I closed my parents' bedroom door and wedged a chair underneath the doorknob, I could hear what sounded like something being knocked over downstairs. I ran back to the cordless phone and frantically whispered to Detective Greer, "I heard it. Someone's downstairs." He told me to grab whatever I could use as a weapon and to get under my parents' bed. I kept the phone pressed to my ear as I grabbed a pair of scissors off my mother's dresser and crawled under the bed, trying my best to control my frantic breathing the entire time. After 10 or so seconds of silence, Detective Greer said some of the most memorable words I'd ever heard. He said, "Officers are at your house now. Just stay where you are. They're about to enter." I'll never forget the relief I felt when I heard the officers kick in the front door and rush through the entire house. It took about 5 minutes of waiting, but when I heard Detective Greer say those magical words, "It's safe for you to go downstairs now. We got him," I knew this whole terrifying ordeal was finally over. When I went downstairs, I was quickly met by an officer who asked me if I was okay. I told him I was fine. Minutes later, Detective Greer arrived and he spent nearly 10 minutes talking to the man in handcuffs before coming inside to talk to me. He told me that there was no doubt that the man who broke into my home was the Walmart stalker. They found him trying to escape out of the same basement window he had crawled in through. Detective Greer also told me that he was armed with a knife and a handgun that was equipped with a homemade silencer. After hearing that, the realization of how close I came to death that morning hit me like a brick. Later on, I learned that the neighbor who reported the break-in was a high school kid who was supposed to be at school during the time of the incident and almost didn't call the police because he feared he would have gotten himself into trouble for ditching. Quite a bit of time has gone by now since that harrowing event, but to this day, I shudder to think what would have happened to me if that kid would have gone off to school like he was expected to, or if he simply chose not to place the call to 911 to save his own skin. People are always saying everything happens for a reason. I've never been more of a believer in that saying than I am now. The stars aligned perfectly for me on that fateful day, and had I not been so traumatized by all that happened, I probably would have gone out and bought a lottery ticket right after the cops took that psychopath away. But I was glad to settle for the next best thing to a winning lotto ticket, and that was being in court when the judge sentenced the short, pudgy Walmart stalker to 2 life sentences without the possibility of parole. I honestly feel like $1 million knowing that sick bastard will die behind bars. I just hope he gets to live a very long and totally miserable life until then. But if another inmate decides to dramatically cut that time frame down, I'd be okay with that too.